So then we go back to this guy Wells, who in the first part I didn't even mention him because there was nothing intelligent about anything he said that was worth even talking about. We come back here and he slips up and says something accurate. He talks about the origin of species, and Stein asks, well, what does Darwin say about the origin of life? And he says, clearly, evolution doesn't talk about the origin of life. It starts after life had already began. Bravo! We got one piece of science actually into this documentary so far, and I use that term loosely. And then Stein screws it all up. He says, well, how can you have a theory about evolution if you don't have, with life changing, if you don't have how life began? Oh, let's see. Can you have, any other theories without having it include everything else before it? Yeah, you can. Germ theory discusses how germs make us sick. Doesn't say anything about where germs come from and how they originally formed. A theory fits an answer. It is an answer to one question. It is not designed to answer every question you ever come up with. And then Wells screws his up too, saying, oh, well, there's an overarching form of evolution. No, stupid. It's abiogenesis. New theory, new issue. So Wells then points Stein to a typical Darwinian idea of how life began. Aren't you the same guy who said that he did not address the origin of life? Now all of a sudden we have something that would be typical of him? That's just intellectually dishonest. We get a quick overview of the Urey Miller project, but Stein then says that most scientists have abandoned this idea. No, they haven't. And then, of course, the real quick little excerpt to set up his lightning from a mud puddle quote, where in the documentary it said that one possible means to be this catalyst to start the basic components could have possibly been lightning. He rides that wave for a long time. The experiment that he then talks about, electricity was introduced in order to jumpstart it, and then it said that the experiment failed. No, it didn't. A chicken didn't pop out of the test tube, no, but they weren't trying to do that. It formed proteins. That's what they wanted it to do. That's what it did. It was a success. Then Stein interviews scientists to try and quote mine a few things out. And while Ruse does a decent job of explaining one possible idea, one thing that is preferred, this idea of crystals, on the back of crystals, and Stein just is not catching on at all about how crystals form and how they replicate, and sometimes they make mistakes, mutation, and then natural selection could take over, and then it could build from there. Instead, he shows this real quick little snippet of crystals and compares this idea to the pseudoscientific type approach, as if the crystals he's talking about are the same kind of crystals that some pagans believed brought them good luck and prosperity and all the rest of that. He even has the nerve to say, crystals? I thought this was science. I studied crystals in science. So yeah, it is. But the thing I found is that Ruse said that is one hypothesis. Without missing a beat, Stein replies, so that's your theory? No, that's the hypothesis. But clearly, Stein doesn't understand the difference between the two. And now we get a really stupid cartoon where they have all these slot machines, and you're supposed to pull the lever 250 times in a row and win the jackpot each and every time in successive order in order to get the 250 proteins needed in order to have a living cell. Yeah, you just don't get it, do you? You can have one protein and then another protein and then another protein, and they can all start getting together later on. They don't have to come in succession just like you're pulling a lever. It's just simply not how it works, but I didn't expect you to understand that, no way. It's not really that complicated. Think of it this way. If you were to get the winning lottery numbers, and this is a common example, so yes, I'm kind of ripping it off from whoever started it. I don't know who it was, so I'm just going to do it anyway. If you were to get the winning numbers in the lottery, you need 6 numbers in order. The odds of you doing it the first try are astronomical and probably won't happen. But let's say you got one number right, and I told you what that number was: natural selection. You eliminate the other 5, and you choose new numbers for those, but keep the correct one: natural selection again. And then you get a second number right. You keep that one too, and now you only have 4 more, and you do it again and again and again until you get 3, and then again and again and again until you get 4, and then again and again and again until you get 5, and eventually you get all 6. Imagine you kept doing that until you had all 250. We're not talking about a weekend here, people. This happened over millions and millions of years. Getting 250 proteins together in that length of time, probably not that difficult by the time you boil it all down. And then he mentions the idea that life was seeded on Earth. He quickly ties that into aliens. That's typically not what is meant by life being seeded on Earth. It could have arrived here on the back of a meteor. It could have gotten here because of a comet coming by. There's any number of ways that life could have gotten here. Sorry, Ben. But still, what's interesting is that he has yet to actually attack evolution, only abiogenesis. He wants to stick his God at the front of I'm sorry, we're not talking about God. Yeah, religion has nothing to do with this. I forgot. Sorry, we're not talking about God. But he just wants to put his intelligent design at the beginning. So then we get a really cool animation of the inner workings of a cell. It actually was pretty enjoyable watching the little bits and pieces move around. And then this big question about how all this information gets stored into the DNA that's in there, and all this, and they all those little jargon words put in there, the information and the data to create and all this. But again, we're still not talking about evolution. We're only talking about abiogenesis, and now we're the inner workings of a cell and where this stuff comes from. But it still has nothing to do with actual evolution. Then we get back to this very first guy, Richard Steinberg, who is, I guess, really popular with Ben here, and he says that, science is not a democratic process. Right? Yes, we got 2 pieces of real science included into this movie. So, all right, good deal. And Stein points out that Darwin challenged the consensus. In other words, the democracy. The idea that most people believed in it. Science is not a democracy. Whatever the evidence points to is where we go. So again, I ask it, where is your evidence for creation? All you have is that, well, there's a bunch of stuff inside cells, and so that had to come from somewhere. Okay, where? Do the studies, do the homework, do the projects, get your funding together. It's not that difficult. You've been doing it all along. Stein even mentions these people don't seem to have a problem putting it in. They're working, so they're doing this stuff. So find where the information comes from. No one is stopping you. So this whole thing, just one great big red herring, just to throw out there that these guys are being held back, but they keep trying to challenge evolution, and that's not what they're after. They're only talking about abiogenesis, which is still being worked on. So, fine, keep doing your studies, and if you can find that designer, if he'll just poke his little head up or whatever it is that he does in order to prove that he's there, then we'll talk about it. Until then, what are you talking about? You have not proven a designer. You have not done anything. So this is still in the field of study. It does not belong in a classroom. So then the film goes into how theories would break through the norm. How would Darwin get his theory published today? And it starts with going through the academy, and then they said that then there's watchdog organizations to stop them. And he starts talking about Eugenie Scott and the organization that she's a part of, and tries to make the suggestion that they're stopping it. No, nobody's stopping it. Again, do the work. If you can prove your point, then fine. Science operates that way. Science actually tries to disprove itself on a regular basis, and new information comes in. You said it yourself earlier in the film. You talked about how Newton had his position shattered by Einstein. So it's not really that difficult for new information to come through. You just have to prove it first. The next step that the film takes kind of steps all over its own toes because it contradicts everything that it just spent all this time setting up. So, is intelligent design centered around religion or not? That'll be the next part. Until then, don't take my word for it. Think for yourselves.